Friends and followers of Meyer's Sign, and those of you who have been following our Core of Discovery series, I'm here in Boise, Idaho, and I'm at the corner of Bannock and Capitol, barely a stone's throw from the Idaho State Capitol building, adjacent the post office and the Hoff building where I once worked. Here you'll find a statue that was dedicated while I was still living here in Boise. It was in 2006, so it would have been a year of the bicentennial celebration of the journey of the Core of Discovery. And as you probably have guessed, it's a depiction of Captains Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. I guessed as much when I first saw the statues, but I just thought, well, it's the captains of the Core of Discovery with a couple of random Native Americans. But I can assure you, these are no random indigenous people. The good-looking gentleman here is one of the best friends that the Core of Discovery ever had. His name was Twisted Hair. And down below him, depicted here at the age of 8 years old, pointing to some trade goods, some camas roots, which were a major subsistence item for the Nez Perce, along with salmon, and there are some other trade goods here, European cloth, a knife. And I'd wondered for a while about the significance of this statue. For one reason, the Core of Discovery were really nowhere near Boise, Idaho, but Idaho itself, the state, played a very important part in their journey. It was the point at which they entered, well, they crossed the Continental Divide over the Lemhi Pass into the Lemhi Valley and the birthplace of Sacagawea. And it was after crossing the Bitterroot Mountains that they stumbled upon a group of indigenous people called the Nimiipuu, or the people in their language, and who have subsequently been known as the Nez Perce. It's an odd nomenclature for these folks because the word in French means pierce noses. They didn't pierce their noses. But apparently, a translation into French of the sign language for their name was interpreted as pierced noses. It's an odd fact of history. What is particularly significant about this statue is this gentleman, Twisted Hair. He was probably the greatest friend that Lewis and Clark had among the peoples that they met as they journeyed from St. Louis to the Pacific Ocean. It was Twisted Hair who not only saved the Corps from starvation after they stumbled over across the Bitterroots in an 11-day trek that nearly proved their undoing, but he also followed with them and guided them as they went to the Columbia River and even partway along the Columbia River, where his services with those of another Nimiipuu chief named Tetaharsky was invaluable. They spoke a language that was common to the folks in that section of the Columbia River, the Sahaptian language, or Sahaptian linguistic group. It was also Twisted Hair who kept the horses of Lewis and Clark for a year, well, not quite a year, when they made their return from Astoria, Fort Clatsop, and were on their way back to St. Louis in 1806. And when they met up with him again at a place near Kamiah, Idaho, that they called Long Camp, it was there that their horses were returned to them so that they could make the overland trip back east again. But what I didn't appreciate at the time was the subsequent story of this 8-year-old who was known as Lawyer. Lawyer was to become a chief of the Nez Perce, whom the Corps of Discovery referred to as the Chupanish. And I will be telling his story in a subsequent episode of our Lewis and Clark series.